You know, overcast days can mean low contrast, flat negatives, and that's boring. I'm more of a high contrast kind of guy. You know, I like the bite, the grit, the grainy, contrasty. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at a roll of Tri-X 400 that I shot here in Austin on an overcast day. All right, some background. I've been using Tri-X since the beginning. Not since the beginning of me, but since the beginning of me shooting pictures, which goes back to like the late 70s, right? And I was a newspaper photographer. I shot mostly sports. And I shot these sports at night. I was young. This was even before high school that I started doing this, and I was working for the local paper as a stringer. I was getting paid for it, so I was very excited to be doing this. And one thing about shooting pictures for a local paper, when you're talking about like high school sports, is you need to get the images to them quickly. And back then, the images were actual prints that you made in the darkroom. So you had to, develop the film, you make the prints, you had to do it fast. And so what I would usually do is I would take the pictures and sometime around halftime or maybe a little after that, I'd rush back home. I processed the film as fast as I could and made prints as fast as I could. And usually we're talking about the best prints, like maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 prints that I'd turn in. So when you're shooting high school sports with Tri-X 400, you're usually going to be pushing that film to something in the neighborhood of 1600 at least, right? So I'd push my film, I'd develop it, and then I'd make the prints, everything quick and dirty just as fast as I could, and then I'd rush those prints down to the paper so that they could get it out the next morning. And that's how I learned. It was just fast photojournalism, run and gun stuff. Now, Tri-X is not my favorite film. I just happen, I like it. I just happen to have a bunch of rolls in my little box of film, and I said, you know what, I gotta go and shoot some of these, just burn some of these rolls off. So I took a roll, I went and shot it out by the lake. It was overcast, it was really dreary conditions. All right, so let me tell you, with Tri-X, depending on how you expose it and you develop it and you post-process it, whether it's in the dark room, with actual prints or in the computer, you're gonna get low contrast images because that's just how it is. And you add in an overcast kind of dreary day and you're talking about low contrast nightmare, right? And so I'm going to show you a little bit of that and show you how I overcome that, at least when I process my own film. Okay, first of all, let me just show you some of the more dreary images right off the roll. All right, we'll start here with the bakehouse. Let me just show you what this looks like before we boosted that contrast. It's something more like this, okay? Kind of flat. And then I just boosted the contrast up here in Lightroom, and it gives me something a little more contrasty. But I really don't like this shot here. Something a little more true to what came out of the camera is this. And I thought it was interesting because now this is a restaurant. It's closed now. It's probably a reason for that. You can do your own research. This is across the parking lot from it. Maybe a defunct laundromat. I don't know. Maybe it's still operational. Who knows? And then, this. All right, note to self with my Bronica, don't try to shoot handheld at 1/15 of a second or slower. You're gonna get some of this blur. Anyway, again, kind of flattish photos. Okay, now we're going to get to the good stuff. This is the remaining portion of the roll. I went under the walking bridge and in that general area on the walking trail there near Town Lake in Austin. And this is directly under the walking bridge. And as you can see, pretty nice tones. It does look pretty contrasty, but I had to make adjustments in post to get it that way, because what it actually looked like was probably something a little closer to this, which is still nice looking, I think, but it just doesn't have that, that edge to it, that bite that I like. And so I like the darks a little darker. And so we're gonna wind up with something more like this. And so let's scroll through a couple more of these. Again, here's one where I boosted the contrast a little bit. Here's another one. This one I really like. Now, if you're in the darkroom, you can boost the contrast on flatter negatives or lower contrast negatives. You can boost that contrast with variable contrast papers or multi-grade papers. And if you've digitized your negatives, you can boost the contrast in Lightroom or Photoshop, just like you would any digitized files. Now, with my bigger negatives, like these medium format negatives, I will usually digitize these with my DSLR. And if you are going to do it that way, I would suggest that you do that in RAW. You create RAW files, not JPEG. Now, if you're using RAW, you're going to get the most information that you can out of that digital file, out of your DSLR shot of that negative, right? Now, it's not going to have as much information as the negative itself, but you're going to get the best you can that way. If you do it with a JPEG, you're going to have very limited room to work with as far as tweaks and adjustments go when you get it into Lightroom or Photoshop. All right, so let me give you an example of an adjustment that you can make. All right, I made this adjustment with the graduated filter, and you can see I'm moving the filter back and forth over this one area, which is basically the highlights, the sky, to bring them down. All right, now some people may say, hey Ed, that's cheating. You brought a piece of film, digitized it, brought it into your computer, and now you're messing with it like you would any other digital picture. Now what I'm doing is I'm making adjustments just like I would if I had this picture in the enlarger in a darkroom. All right, I would be able to dodge and burn stuff just like I'm doing here. And so if I wanted to, pull out a little more information out of the whites, I could do that in the darkroom. Or if I wanted to, deepen the blacks or lighten some areas up, I could do that in the darkroom. But here in Lightroom, I can do the same thing. So I don't believe there's any problem with messing with your negatives once you get them digitized. All right, so back to the topic at hand. What I wanted to really talk about today was that Tri-X400 is a really great versatile film. I really like it. Again, it's not my favorite film, but I do like it and I do use it for various reasons. And just because it's not high contrast right out of the box doesn't mean you can't get some contrast out of this film, all right? What a lot of people will do is they'll use colored filters over the lens when using this film, all right? So that might be something in the red category or the orange category. They can bring some more contrast into those negatives. You can also push the film. A lot of people like to push this film to 800 or 1600, which is a good way to help increase contrast or the appearance of contrast. And of course, you can use longer development times. So when you're shooting with Tri-X, there are a lot of ways to boost the contrast. One good way to get good high contrast images, though, is to use high contrast scenes, right? So you wouldn't want to go and shoot on a dreary day like I did unless that's all you had to work with. But if you had the choice, you probably would want to shoot scenes with higher contrast, harder light, darker shadows, things like that. So you've got like a good range there to work with. Really flat, even lighting, and where all the tones are kind of the same in the scene, that's gonna result in what it is. It's gonna give you flat looking pictures. Okay, colored filters over the lens, pushing the film, longer development times, and just shooting high contrast scenes. Those are good options to think about. But there are also things that you can do in the darkroom once you've got your negatives ready to go. In the darkroom, you can use variable contrast papers or multi-grade papers, something in the higher grades. Those will give you a higher contrast. If you've got those images digitized and they're in your computer and you've got them in Lightroom or Photoshop, you can just boost the contrast there like you would anything else. Hey, if you haven't tried Tri-X400 ever, then I think I'm encouraging you to try it. Now, if you haven't used it in a long time, I'm also encouraging you to pick up a roll, put it in your film camera, and go out and take some shots with it. Have some fun. Take it to a local lab or mail it out to a lab or process it yourself. And if you want to know how I process this roll of film, everything is going to be in the description below. Go ahead and check that out. And you can see how I did it. Otherwise, that's about it for today. I want to thank you for hanging out with me again. Give me a thumbs up. Click that like button if you like this video. If you haven't already, go ahead and click subscribe. That's it, guys. See you next time.